Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Chris Miles, who's here to share with us the Work Optional Blueprint. Live free, be wealthy, make a difference. So what if everything you were taught about money is actually keeping you trapped in the grind? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Chris Miles is a cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor who helps high-income earners break free from the grind and achieve financial freedom without Wall Street. He's the founder of Money Ripples. He retired twice by 40, author of the Work Optional Blueprint, and host of the Money Ripples podcast, helping clients create over $300 million in cash flow and passive income. So welcome to the show, Chris Miles.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Marianne.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about not just your book, but also your life. So I think we should start from the beginning. Like, what even got you into the financial and finance industry?
Not the way I intended. I was majoring in sociology and psychology it was sociology major with a triple minor in psychology, ballroom dancing, and Japanese.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
a little bit of a renaissance there. But my plan was to actually become a business consultant because that's what really intrigued me when I met the professors that had actually been in the real life, not the ones that have been, lifelong professors. So my plan was to become a business owner at some point and help consult business owners, but naturally I had no business experience. And I didn't want to come out of school with this MBA, with this big ego like a lot of college students have, thinking I can help you out when I don't know jack squat about real life. So I decided to take a sabbatical from college, and I was trying to find some business to start so I can get that experience and then go back and finish my degree. Well, long story short, the first thing that came up that was kind of intriguing was being a financial advisor, because I thought, hey, worst case scenario, not only do I learn about business, but I also learned about investing. So, worst case, I walk away with at least some investing experience or something. Well, I went down that path for a while and I actually loved it. Loved it so much being my own boss. I was 100% commission only and running my own business. I loved it so much. I actually never finished my degree. I dropped out of college. So I'm in the likes of guys like Steve Jobs and whatnot who, went to school, did really well, but decided not to finish up. And I did that for about 4 years. I drank the Kool-Aid. I was the salesman in a suit that told you to set and forget it, spend nothing, save everything, save it forever, and hopefully someday you'll have something. Well, 4 years in, of course, my dad reaches out to me and he says, well, Chris, when are you going to advise me? Understand, my dad was like the penny pinching, post-depression era mentality saver, right? This guy bought everything on sale, threw nothing away. In fact, when I was between the ages of 8 and 9, I ate Cap'n Crunch for an entire year straight. Fortunately, we ran out of Cap'n Crunch and he switched to Fruity Pebbles the next year. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. If it wasn't on sale, he didn't buy it. So I'm expecting that, okay, if anybody's got this figured out, if anybody has, some sort of hope, it should be my dad. And he even told me, he says, Chris, I'm 61 years old. This job has literally almost killed me. He's like, I've already had strokes and heart attacks. The stress is just killing me. I want out. What can I do? And so I see his finances for the first time in my life. I fly back home to Oregon to see him. And as I'm looking at all these numbers and finances, I said, okay, Dad, good job. You're debt free, including your mortgage. So you have nothing to pay there. You've been saving your company's 401k for decades. Here's the thing, Dad. If you try to retire today, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you're going to run out of money. He said, all right, Mr. Sunshine, that's not what I wanted to hear. Okay, you're supposed to tell me what I'm supposed to do here. What can I do? And I said, I don't know. You did everything right, as I teach as a financial advisor. All I can suggest is just save more, work longer, which he did. He ended up working into his 70s until he couldn't really work anymore. And then, of course, went the next 10 years just penny pinching the rest of his life till he passed away just a few months ago. And that bothered me at that time. This is back at the end of 2005. And I thought, well, good grief. If he's been doing everything right, what's going to happen to me? Because I've been following in his footsteps. What's going to happen to all my clients? They've been doing the same thing. In fact, every financial advisor has been teaching this as if this is the gold standard of what you're supposed to do. And look at him. His gold standard is broke. And so finally I was just looking for answers. I was starting to question what I was teaching. And about a month later, I ran into a friend of mine who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then he quit to go do some real estate investing with his dad. And when I called him up to wish him a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year at the end of 2005, he said, I asked him, I was like, well, how are things going? He says, Chris, my life's amazing right now. My dad and I have partnered on some deals, and we've actually doubled his income as a professor at the local university. I said, well, come on now. This is too good to be true. There's no way that's possible. He said, Chris, we're doing it. And by the way, Chris, let me ask you a question. How many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money? And I started to kind of do a mental inventory, and I said, well, I mean, I've got retired physicians, but no, they still watch CNN and worry about running out of money there too. So that doesn't work because they're watching the news. So they're always scared. They always think they're going to run out of money too soon. He says, okay, great. Good job, Chris. How about this? How many of you guys, as financial advisors, are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, not off the business, but actually doing these same investments you've been recommending? And I remember there was guys working in my office since the 1970s, and yet they didn't seem like they're slowing down anytime soon. And I said, I don't know, maybe none. There's your problem. And over the ensuing months, going into 2006, I started to really get into this world that he was in real estate investing, and started to see what was possible, that it wasn't about accumulating a lot of money. It was about acceleration. It was about creating income. And that was the thing I was missing. And when I realized, for example, the thing that was like this big epiphany in my mind that blew up, in fact, it even got me to quit being a financial advisor, was I realized, I said, wait a minute, like you're saying I could have $100,000, make 1% a month by loaning my money to a real estate investor, and I make $1,000 a month? That's way better than $3,000 a year based on traditional financial advising, recommendations and whatnot. I'd rather have 12,000 a year versus 3,000, right? And that was the thing that was surprising. And in fact, it got to this point where there was such a really a mental battle, right? That was challenging everything I'd learned and was teaching, that I had to make a choice. I either would stay in financial advising and just put my blinders on, or I keep my integrity intact and quit. And so I chose the latter. I quit, vowed never to teach about money again. I know it's ironic because we're here today, but I vowed never to teach about money again. I would just be a mortgage broker, because in 2006, anybody could be a mortgage broker. And I would go and just teach ballroom dancing on the side. And I was doing that until finally, as I started to invest my own money and do things in real estate, I was able to retire in 2006 when I was 28, almost 29 years old. And that blew my mind. It was so easy in comparison, in contrast to what my dad did, where he slaved and saved away for 40 plus years, and yet it wasn't enough. And that's where really my life shifted. And of course, people say, well, Chris, I heard you retired twice. Well, that's because when 2007 and 8 started hitting, and the real estate market dipped, I went broke. I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire, literally from millionaire to welfare, and had to dig out of that hole. And eventually I was able to pay off that $1 million plus of debt that had accrued during that recession. And then finally in 2016 was able to do it a second time. And the thing that I'm most proud of is not just that I had to do it twice, but most importantly is that I was able to help others do the same thing. That it wasn't just me. I was able to help people in better situations than mine, and be able to make it and create that financial freedom as well, where I call it work optional, where they have enough passive income to pay all their bills. They have enough passive income to work because they want to, not because they have to. And that's really what my book, The Work Optional Blueprint, is all about, is that whole story and how we did it.
What a remarkable story, Chris. I mean, my goodness. And then when the financial, crash happened, how
Mhm.
did you dig your way back out of that? Because I mean, $1 million in debt, that's a big deal.
It sure was. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. It wasn't like I just woke up one morning and said, here, poof, it's all gone. It was a daily battle, because imagine this. I mean, at this time, going into 2007, I had 3 young children, all under the age of, well, 3. They were 3 and under, 3 children at that time. 2009, my 4th child was born. So I had 4 kids, 5 and under by that point. And every day was a battle, because I had increased my lifestyle, because I had more than enough coming in. Money's not much different than air. When you have so much oxygen, you never think about every breath you take. But when it's taken away, you count every breath. And the same is true with money. And so I had this perfect storm happening. It wasn't because I went into excessive debt. That wasn't the case. What had really happened is, as anybody who remembers, of course, during that period of time, we saw real estate values tank. Now, I also had issues too because, one, I was banking on property values going up. That was one mistake I made. Two, I locked up a lot of my equity inside my house because I figured as a mortgage broker, if anything goes wrong, I can always just, cash them, do a cash out refinance. And I figured it wouldn't be a problem because I have good credit and I know how to do it. Well, when they changed the rules starting in the summer of 2007, and I witnessed it firsthand because I was actually trying to do a cash out refinance of my house when I was starting a new business in 2007. But the bank said, oh, you know what? If you just get your credit score up 2 more points, maybe we'll give it to you next month. And then next month rolls around. They said, oh, we just changed the rules last week. Do X, Y, and Z, we'll give you the loan. And then the next month rolls around. I said, can we get this done finally? And they said, we're sorry. We no longer give loans to business owners. And now I was finding myself in this stuck position because pretty soon, especially after starting this new business and trying to get things off the ground, I was putting money there. I obviously had, my own family to take care of as well. I was I was the only breadwinner in that family because my wife was dealing with 3 little kids running around screaming all the day, right? So the pressure started to get heavy, and it got to the point where I found I was in the hole 15,000, 16,000 a month. And trying to reverse it was really difficult. I mean, I turned in my Mercedes. I said, here, take it. You're going to take it from me in a month or so anyways, when I can't make payments. I did that. I sold off about everything we could. Eventually, we foreclosed on our house in 2009, exactly 1 week after my 4th child was born. We had to move out. That wasn't fun with postpartum, and all these things were happening. It was very crippling. And it was a very depressing time for me because there was also that feeling of being a fraud, because I literally came out of retirement in 2007 to teach people how to do what I did to get out of that rat race. And here I am back in it. And so this is what I did, Marianne. Like, instead, I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race because I can't teach something I'm not doing. And so I started teaching people how to find money, because that was the thing I was doing. It was, how do I get creative to find money? How do you get scrappy? And I started to get very creative. Even the way I paid off my debt, I used a very different method that even, like Dave Ramsey or other people wouldn't use. It was one that I created on my own based on what would take the least amount of dollars to make the biggest improvement on your month-to-month cash flow. So I started doing things like that. Eventually, I could only pare down my expenses so far, especially after I foreclosed my dream home that I had for 3 years. I eventually had to sell that, basically actually tried to sell it. They wouldn't let me sell it because the bank was owned by Lehman Brothers. And so eventually they had to foreclose on me because that was the only thing they allowed me to do. And so finally I was able to rent a house for a quarter of the price, get just down to bare bones, get very, very scrimpy. I think I was living on $4,500 a month, something like that, with a family of 5 kids, 7, family of 7. And that was the interesting thing is, I'll tell you, Marianne, like, the thing that was tough, I mean, not to mention there was that imposter syndrome because, I felt like someone who had it figured out, but then I lost it all. I was literally on welfare, on food stamps, and that was rough. So I was having this mental battle on a daily basis. And part of it was trying to control my mind. That was part of what was the biggest battle, I'd say, is really how to control my mindset, because my mindset wanted to go into deep scarcity and depression. Even my wife at that time, she says, should I move in my sister's basement and let you figure things out? And I said, no, that's the worst thing you could do right now. If you move out right now, that's going to put me in a bad, depressing spot. And so for me, each morning I had to wake up and create a win. And that win for me was doing what Tony Robbins would call the hour of power, or I would call it power hour for short. And what I would do is I'd wake up, I would move my body first thing in the morning just to get my blood pumping. It could be walking, running, it could be calisthenics, it could be going to the gym, whatever it might be. I was trying to do anything. Of course, I couldn't afford a gym membership by that point. So I was pretty much, if I was doing it, I was like working out in my house, right? From there, I would also do something to control my spirit and as well as my mind. So even when I would exercise, sometimes I would, listen to audiobooks or podcasts and things like that. I would even do that on my commute or drive. I would listen to CDs, books on CD, because, podcasts were just up and coming at that point. I was also doing things like meditating, praying, reading scriptures, doing all these kind of things to really get my mind, body, and spirit in the right place. So at least I felt like I was getting ahead, because every night when I laid my head on my pillow, I felt like a loser. So when I woke up in the morning, I had to do something to feel like a winner again. And that's what I would do. Because in that moment when I'm working out, I realized I'm not completely broke. I'm still alive. I'm not dead. I'm not thrown in debtor's prison. There's no such thing in America like that. So it's not like those things were happening. And when I started becoming detached from the stuff, when I started becoming detached from the money and just focused on now get my mind under control and then focusing on the one thing I could do, which beyond just trying to lower my expenses was now, how do I increase my income? And this is the secret I learned, Marianne, is that if I want to increase my income, the real secret that's worked since the beginning of time is figure out how do I deliver more value? How do I add value? How do I solve problems for people and serve people in such a way that they want to exchange money to get that service or have that problem solved for them? And so that's what I was doing. And that's why I shifted and really pivoted my business to go away from getting people out of the rat race. Because most people even told me, they said, listen, I would love to learn what you've learned, but honestly, I don't even have money right now. I need to know where to find money. And in the back of my mind, I would think, well, good grief. Like I know my situation is way worse than theirs. I wouldn't tell them this verbally because I didn't want to do business suicide, but I knew my situation was way worse financially than theirs. And so when they'd say, yeah, it feels hopeless. And I told them, I said, listen, if I can help you find the money, would you pay me? They said, well, yeah, of course. If you can find the money for me to pay you, great. I said, great. Here's what you're going to do. And I would show them creative things to do to, start tracking their money and find ways to free it up there or save money on taxes especially if they're business owners, or it could be pay off debt creatively, like I mentioned before, lower costs on insurances and things like that, just every little thing. And pretty soon, as I started to do this, really day after day, week after week with several clients, after about a year or so, it became a process. And it just happened to be at that perfect time in 2009, right when I became detached from all my stuff. I was really down to just renting a house and just trying to feed my family. Right when I got down to that bare bones point, that's when everything turned around. The right people showed up, people that were centers of influence, like in the chiropractic and dental industries, started to show up. And I remember there was one chiropractic coach that I connected him with one of our CPAs, saved him $50,000 a year in taxes. The guy literally cried.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, he was just so grateful and so happy. So then he started to send all of his clients over from in the chiropractic business, right? And so I started getting all these chiropractors come to us saying, help me do the same thing. How can you help me find more money? And literally we went from almost bankrupt as a company to then doing over $5 million that next year in 2010. And of course, because I was just being lean and mean with my own finances, money was starting to roll in. I was starting to use that money to help me pay down my debts and start to dig out of that hole.
What a remarkable story. Thank you for taking the time to share that because I think it's so important. A lot of times people think, oh, look at him, he's got everything, or look at her, she's got it all made. And the exterior can really be something that doesn't really tell the full story of a person's struggle.
So true. It's really true. You never know what people are going through, right? And in all aspects of life, right? I mean, there are so many people, even right now, that I find when I start to talk with more friends, they're suffering silently. They're suffering in some way, shape, or form. It could be financial, but it might be their own marriage or a relationship with their kids. It could be their own health, dealing with family members passing on, dealing with mental or emotional struggles and anxiety and things like that. I mean, there's so many things that people struggle with. And nobody's immune to it. We're all part of the human club. And I think that's one of the advantages I had in my life is that, most people I talk to, even from a financial standpoint, have never been lower than me. They've never experienced something that bad. And that gives me a different level of compassion and empathy that you don't see often in the financial world. Most financial world, it's a lot of people judging you, shaming you, telling you that you need to do this better or that better. And the truth is, they're just full of crap. Like there's just so many people doing that. And the truth is that we are emotional beings trying to live a human experience and figure out how to make life work. And we're all starting from somewhere.
So, what advice do you have for somebody that is looking to make a massive change in their finances and the way they live?
The first thing is be honest with yourself. I mean, really be willing to do that. For me, that happened in 2007, about the time I was trying to get that cash out refinance for my mortgage. Because like I said, money was so abundant, I wasn't bothered tracking that money. I didn't do anything with that. So I would just, see that there's money in the bank. I'm like, good, I'm fine. And I'll tell you, many people, that's how they live life. They've got money in the bank or the checking account. They're saying, okay, I'm good. But then when there's not, they panic and they have to scramble and get scrappy, right? And that's no way to live life. That's a very scarcity driven life. So the first thing you got to do is willing to be honest, be willing to look. This is why one of the first money leaks, the money secrets, cash flow secrets I teach is begin tracking your money. You can do it any way you want. I mean, some people will use spreadsheets, paper. I usually recommend using something that's more automated, like Rocket Money, for example, is a type of app you can use that can help you categorize and find out where you're spending money, but also how much money is coming in. Understand this is that most of the advice out there today, the financial advice you're given, is all from a scarcity saver mentality. When you get the people that are out there telling you to live on rice and beans and to cut out that latte because that $5-6 latte is somehow going to save you millions of dollars in the end, that's not really the case, right? The truth is this: is that you need to come from a place of abundance. Now, scarcity does not work. Scarcity does not create freedom. My dad was the penny pinching super saver, and yet he never felt free. Yes, he had money, and he had money more than the average American. But it's still, for him, like when you're a saver, right? You can never pay off your debt fast enough if you have any debt. You can never save enough. You feel like it's just never enough. And you can never find freedom when you feel like things are never enough. Same thing with spenders. Spenders, it's never enough because they got to hustle all the time. They got to keep, hunting to be able to, to be able to pay for their things they want, right? And so for them, it's just a never-ending battle, never stop working. And that doesn't work either. You have to become a steward. A steward takes the best of the spender and saver and puts it in one person. Because a steward says, listen, like, I know that money is meant to be used, because the spenders are willing to use money. It just never comes back, right? It goes out and then it's gone. Stewards say, what's the best use of this money? What can I do to create more with it? How can I increase my stewardship? How can I increase my wealth, increase my income? How can I bless more lives with the money that I have too? It's not just about me, it's about others as well. And when you start to take that mentality, it's a very different change. And so when you even look at your money, it's different, because savers, when they look at money, they hyperfixate on their expenses, how much they're spending. And they say, oh, I hate any money I can spend. I always know when I talk to a saver, because even some savers will say, no, I'm a spender. Why do you think that? Well, because I've got to pay for utilities. I got to pay for this and this and this. I said, just by the way you're responding, you're not a spender. You're a saver, because you hate spending money. Spenders never had that problem. They love spending money, right? But savers hate it. I said, you're living in scarcity. You will always be in financial bondage for the rest of your life. No matter how many millions you save up, you will be stuck. You got to gravitate over closer to the spender, realizing that there is more than enough in your resources in your life and to spare. Stop fixating on just the expenses. Also focus on the income. Spenders only focus on the income, but ignore the expenses. As a steward, you look at both. You look at your income and your expenses and look at the full flow of money and figure out, what can I do to be a wiser steward of the expenses when I am spending money? It's not about just living cheap, but what can I do to spend money in the best ways? And then, of course, on the income side is, what can I do to create more value for people? How can I become a better problem solver? Because if you're a solutions provider in your job, in your business, or whatever it is that you do to make money, you will find that you will always have money coming in. You'll always be taken care of when you're always seeking to first fulfill on how to add value in other people's lives. That's the easiest remedy to get out of any financial situation, any hole. And the greatest first step is to be honest and be willing to look at your money, which is why you want to track your money.
That's such an important piece. I think a lot of people kind of gloss over or miss. Mm-hmm. What do you think is another very important piece that people should pay attention to?
Another important piece too, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but a lot of people think that, well, let's be honest, most of the financial advice is coming from people that get paid to give that advice, right? We've got financial advisors, and who do the financial advisors work for? You would like to believe they work for you, but they really don't. And I've learned this firsthand, being behind the Wizard of Oz curtain there, right? I've seen what the wizard looks like, and the wizard is actually the big, large financial institutions. They're the ones profiting from teaching the set it and forget it mentality. Because why? Because they want you to save money on a regular basis. They teach you to save money every paycheck or every week, every month, whatever it is, save it on a regular basis. Why? Because that builds up their money, and then they charge you a fee for that money. Now, you might say, no, I don't get charged fees at all. No, there's always fees. No matter what you think, there are always fees coming out. Even if it's off the top of what they pay you in the returns, they're always getting paid. So the more money they have, the more they get paid. And this is true for financial advisors as well, especially those on commission. So when you're putting money away on a regular basis and building it up and compounding it, they keep telling you compounding interest is the eighth one of the world. They're really filling you full of crap, because the truth is this, is that they are, yes, there is such thing as compounding interest. It's not the eighth one of the world. It is a true thing, but it's not as great as you think it is, because they're telling you to save forever, set it, keep going, delay that retirement, delay all your life, really, right? Delay any goodness in your life right now for that someday that may never come, because you might not even be alive to enjoy all that, retirement money they keep telling you about. And then even when you are supposed to pull out the money, what do they tell you to do? Pull out less than the interest so you don't run out of money, which is amazing business strategy for those banks, because that means that their assets keep growing, yet you keep pulling off the little meager, little scraps off the bone. That's what they keep telling you to do. That's what they try to convince you in that saver mentality. And that's the problem, is that when you hear that out there, you realize that you're just part of a cog in a machine, and I realized I was a big cog in that. I realized that's why I had to leave, is when I was teaching people to create this financial freedom, all this overpromise and underdeliver at the end of the day. And it wasn't just because, in 4 years, it's not like I saw the beginning and end of retirement from my brand new clients, but it's from the clients that had decades of other advisors advising them. And then I would inherit them as clients through the company. And then I'd see their situation. I'd say, wow, you're not much better off than every other American. You've had financial advisors helping you and you're not much better off. And this is the thing. And this is where I get controversial, not just because of this, but I get controversial because when people say the 401k is brainless, you should do it, especially if you get a company match. That's free money, right? So why not do it? Well, here's what people don't realize with the 401k. One, there is no tax advantage to the 401k. Yeah, you don't get taxed today, but you get taxed later. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think taxes are going up or down in the future?
That obviously up,
Right? I didn't think they can go down much more. And then in 2016, there's the whole, that Trump tax plan that got passed, and then they lowered it even more. In the really now it's going on about 110 years plus history of the federal tax rate. We're in one of the lowest tax brackets in history. So you're right, Marianne. Like the odds are, if you're a betting person, the odds are that taxes are going to go up. You don't think the government knows that? You don't think the government's got partnered up with these financial companies telling you, listen, I think the best thing we need to do right now is to tell people don't get taxed today, because it makes them think about the here and now and say, yay, I don't get taxed, but then get taxed later when they, one, don't have kids at home anymore, hopefully. So there's not the tax write-off from kids. Two, if you did what they told you to do, you would have paid off your mortgage, which means you're not writing off your mortgage interest anymore. You've probably paid off student loans, so you're not writing off the interest on that either. You basically lost almost all your tax breaks, and yet now you're supposed to pull out that money. And because of inflation alone, you have to pull out more money anyways just to survive. And so you're now pulling out more money at a higher tax bracket. So to me, that's one big problem with IRAs, 401ks, and those kind of things. Now, Roth IRA could be a better option, right? But here's the other thing. When I hit that little myth that people believe in about 401ks, they'll say, yeah, but Chris, what about the match? Here's the thing. I did a study on this, Marianne, and I took Fidelity, because Fidelity is the largest 401k provider in America. They have 45 million clients in America today. Out of those 45 million clients, when they release their numbers, right now there's about 1.1 million people that have over $1 million. Here's the thing. 45 million and 1.1 million have $1 million plus. That means really about 2.5% of people have at least $1 million. The crazy thing is, Transamerica did a third-party study. Transamerica did a study on these same millionaires, asking them, how do you feel about retirement? Did you know that 35% of these millionaires, quote unquote, believe that it'll take a miracle to be able to retire? That's what they said. They said they checked the box, it'll take a miracle for me to retire. Why? Because financial advisors are now teaching that you can only pull off 3% a year in your 60s, not 4%. That rule was debunked a long time ago. Although the guy that wrote the book is now trying to say if you invest with him, he'll let you pull out 5%. Go figure. But 3%. Well, if you have $1 million saved up, 3% is only $30,000 a year. So right there, that's a big problem. So already we've seen proof it's not really working. But here's the second problem, the match. People say, well, the match is 100% return if I get a 100% match, right? Well, day one it is, but it's not 100% compounded. If you put into a compound interest calculator, say 108%, say the market average is 8, which is closer to what the real average of the market is. put 108% return and say you save 10,000 a year, and watch in 20 years how you'll say, wait a minute, I'm richer than Jeff Bezos right now. Listen, no one has ever said that they've made more money than Bezos in their 401ks. Never has anybody said, gotten the lifestyle of the rich and famous, for those of us old enough to remember that show, and said, yeah, I saved in my 401k. That's how I became so filthy rich. That's never, ever happened. You do not get a true 100% return. Over long term, it gives you about a 3% extra return compounded. That's what it actually does because it only doubles the number at the end. And so the longer you save in those plans, the less the actual interest is added to the performance of your funds. And that is where the key piece comes in. The funds, Fidelity. I actually looked at their numbers. I said, let's see what their target date funds, where they will say 2035, if you're trying to retire 2035 or 2040, 2055 or 2065. They have all these different dates that you can just go click. You don't have to do anything. You just say, oh yeah, that's the year I want to retire. Let's put my money there. And in fact, about 85% of millennials pick those target date funds automatically. Here's what's interesting is that those target date funds for the last 10 years underperformed the stock market by over 2%. And that does not include that there's a minimum fee of 0.75%, which means that between fees and the bad performance, it's about 3% worse than the stock market if you were to do it on your own in the same places. And there is a problem because remember, the 401k match only adds about 3% long term. So guess what? That match just makes up for the bad performance and high fees in a 401k. This is why people in 401ks are not getting ahead. And no one is telling you this. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Very, very few people in America today are telling you about this absolute truth. So when I tell people, why are you stuffing money in these 401ks, especially if they're charging up credit cards and having higher interest over there, they're like, well, because I get that match, I get 100%. So it makes sense. No, it doesn't, because those 401ks stink. Their performance stinks. And as a result, people are getting to retirement saying, oh, geez, it's just not enough. I guess I'll have to keep working to my 70s, which is why more and more people are coming out saying the advice is, oh, you should just work into your 70s. Well, surprise, that's why, because you've been duped in the system thinking it's going to work.
That is just so heartbreaking to hear how this is all set up the way it is. And we've been taught a long time that we follow this path and will give us the path to independent wealth, which is definitely not the case. When people purchase your book, what type of things will they learn from it?
Yeah, if we go beyond like the story and everything, right? They will learn about where are the ways to find and free up cash. That's the first thing is what are those creative ways to find money? Because first thing, if you want to really invest and create true passive income, not the passive income that people claim and they tell you to start some online business or some Amazon or Etsy business, which is anything but passive. That's not what passive income is. To me, passive income is when you have your investments doing all the work for you, not you having to do all the work for the investments. So even when people hear me talking about real estate investing, I'll talk about people doing active like fix and flips or trying to do things with creating their own rentals and they're managing their own rentals. But personally, I hate that. I actually like passive income, meaning that even if I buy a rental, which I won't buy anywhere in the western half of the U.S., like where I live today, I would buy rentals out east. And so I've bought rentals out there where I can make a much better return because they're lower prices with better rents. I've also done things outside of rentals where I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. For example, I mentioned loaning my money to real estate investors. Often they're trying to fix and flip properties and do things that's short term. I often will get paid at least 10, 12% a year on that money. And that's the difference. For example, I'll use a case study from actually a guy that was one of the top ranking colonels in the state of California in the National Guard. He had just retired about 4 or 5 years ago. And he was able to retire with $1 million, lived out in Danville. And he went to his financial advisor. He says, I've got $1 million. What can I do? And the financial advisor says, you can live on $3 million a year. Or sorry, not $3 million. I wish. He says, you can live on $30,000 a year with that $1 million. And he said, no, I can't do that. So instead, what did he do? He started looking for answers. He found my podcast, the Money Ripples podcast, and then reached out. And as we started looking at the money, it's like, well, we can do better things here. We can actually focus on how to generate income from this, not just live on less than the interest. And so he did things like he bought a couple duplexes out east, right? They started kicking off some money there. He got some, oil and gas, mineral rights, and things of that nature, which has some tax advantages. He did some things with like apartment buildings where he got shared ownership. It's called a syndication, where you go in with other investors. And he did all that. And next thing you know, instead of living on $30,000 a year, he now all of a sudden he got on my podcast for a follow-up interview just 6 months later, says, Chris, now I'm at about $13,000 a month. And I told him, I was like, well, even if it fluctuates, still conservatively, you're making $130,000 a year at least versus $30,000 a year. And that's what they kind of learn in the book is, okay, great. How does that happen? And you gotta change the way you see investing. You gotta change the way you see money. And when you start to come from that steward mentality, especially you start to see what's actually available that financial advisors either won't teach you or don't want you to know about, because either one, they don't know it themselves, or two, because they know they will not make a dime doing these kind of investments. They're always going to say, don't do it, or it's too risky. When in truth, the risky thing is guaranteed failure following their plans. Because the truth is less than 1% of people really see success following the traditional financial advice with their financial advisors.
So, Chris, where can people go to learn more about your work and also your podcast and be part of your community?
Yeah, if you ever want to find the book, The Work Optional Blueprint, you can find that on Amazon. For anything else to follow us, just look up Money Ripples, whether it's at Money Ripples on social media, moneyripples.com, or our Money Ripples podcast.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been such an honor. Thank you so much, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, The Work Optional Blueprint. Make sure to visit Chris's website at moneyripples.com for more information and to be part of his community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.